Memos written by former FBI Director James Comey are shedding new light on his interactions with President Trump before Comey was fired. CBS News obtained a redacted version of the 15-page document, which was sent over to Congress by the Justice Department last night. In it, Comey details conversations he had with the president about allegations made in the so-called Steele dossier, also about loyalty, information leaks. Former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, there's a lot in there. In response to the memos, the president tweeted, "James Comey memos just out and show clearly that there was no collusion and no obstruction." CBS News Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues is in Washington. Jeff, these are interesting memos. They are a lot of what we already knew from Comey's testimony, from his interviews about the book, but they're in more detail, and I wonder what you took away from them.
Yeah, I was really struck by the detail in these memos. It's really remarkable how he was able to remember all of those events and the chronological order of some of these events. He said that he wasn't quoting at all times directly from the president, but he was essentially paraphrasing what the president was saying. And those 7 memos are the type of roadmap that an investigator would use to investigate a meeting, what was said, who was there, who was outside the door. And so in that sense, we got a really revealing look at these meetings that involve Comey and the president. They cover a time period between January and April of 2017.
One thing that jumped out at me was the new details on Mike Flynn and why the president might have been disappointed with him and ultimately let him go.
Yeah, that one statement in the Comey memos in which the former FBI director said that the president stated to him that Flynn seemed to have serious judgment problems. That's paraphrasing what Comey was saying in that memo, but in Comey's view, the president expressed concerns about Mike Flynn's judgment, which is interesting because in the overall Russia investigation, the time period that it took for the White House to fire Mike Flynn after finding out from the Department of Justice and acting Attorney General at the time, Sally Yates, that Flynn, in their view, had been compromised. It took the White House 18 days to act. But from these memos, it sounds like there were concerns, certainly with the president, about Mike Flynn's judgment. And then in later memos, you see Comey describing a meeting in which he's asked by then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus whether there was a FISA application or surveillance of Mike Flynn. So there were obviously within the White House in that period of time questions about Mike Flynn, his judgment, whether he was under investigation. And that is why that time period around his firing is important for investigators.
And the president specifically complaining that Flynn had taken a long time to relay details of an important phone call. Okay, so then there's this question of whether there was collusion or obstruction. Some details in here kind of flesh out what James Comey has already said, that the president suggested that he'd like to see the Flynn investigation go away, that he mentioned this cloud that he would like to see leave his administration because of this Russia investigation. Some people say that's more evidence of possible obstruction. The president says it's not. Does it move the needle much in either direction?
Well, as you point out, it depends on who you ask.
Sure.
You know, if you talk to some Republicans on Capitol Hill, they'll tell you that this fuller picture of the interactions in their view, clears the president. This, they say, does not show obstruction of justice. But if you talk to critics of the president, they will say, look how he was obsessed, if you will, with the more salacious parts of this dossier, and also how he kept going back to Flynn, and he was talking about leaks. But there seemed to be this focus by the president on the dossier, on the Russia investigation. Then there was this loyalty pledge, and then there was the request to drop the Flynn investigation. So again, it depends on who you talk to when some of these facts surrounding this Russia investigation come out, and that's what we're seeing here with these memos. These memos, obviously written by James Comey, someone who over the last year and a half has come under fire for some of his tactics. And so there are critics of Comey who question the accuracy of these memos, who question his judgment. And so again, it really depends on who you ask. But the main point here, I think, is that these memos give a fuller picture around what was happening during that period.
Okay, last thing, the DNC today filing a lawsuit against Russia, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign about the 2016 election, kind of lumping them all in one boat and saying that they found a willing and active partner in Donald Trump's campaign. So what can you tell us about this lawsuit?
Well, our sources are telling us this is something that the DNC chairman, Tom Perez, has been thinking about for some while. And what has happened now is they have filed this in federal court, and we'll see where it goes. You know, there are some people who are calling this a stunt. But our sources tell us that the DNC feels like it wants to someone needs to be held accountable in all of this. Is this a stunt? Well, we'll have to see if it gets some legs and takes off in federal court. It's hard to tell if it will. The question is, what happens if it does? Does it open up Donald Trump Jr., other Trump campaign officials to questioning under oath? We'll have to see.
Okay, Jeff Pegues in Washington. Thanks a lot, Jeff.